Okay, so we're continuing on our side quest to figure out what the Rambam's view is of learning Talmud. So, quick review yesterday. There are two phases in the Rambam's Talmud Torah program. Phase one is you divide your learning in thirds. Third Torah B'Ksav, third Torah Peh, third Talmud. And by Talmud, he means understanding and comprehending the end of the matter from the beginning, deriving one matter from another, comparing one matter to another, and applying the 13 or the midos that the Torah is expounded through until you understand, until you know how they operate, and understanding how the usr and the mutter, etc., derives from the Torah Peh. So that's at the beginning of a person's knowledge. Then, once he has attained mastery of Torah B'Ksav and Torah Peh to the point where he doesn't need to constantly go over it again, so then he sets aside times, I guess, regular times to review Torah B'Ksav and Torah Peh so he doesn't forget. And then he turns all of his days to Talmud alone. And then the Rambam throws in cryptically, well, for us it was cryptic, Divrei Kabbalah, which is Nach, is included in Torah B'Ksav, and the explanation of them is in Torah Peh, and then the topics that are in Pardes is included in Talmud. So that's where we had a bunch of questions. First of all, what exactly is this perush of Divrei Kabbalah? You know, we said that if Divrei Kabbalah is Nach, and if Torah Peh is the halachic explanation of the mitzvos in Torah B'Ksav, so how much of Nach really is in that category? And furthermore, what about all the non-halachic perushim of Torah B'Ksav, like Breshis Rabbah, which, by the way, I figured out the thing in the Haggadah we looked at that says Rabbi Hoshaya, I think, composed the Pirush on Sefer Breshis. So at least Rav Makbili holds that's Breshis Rabbah, you know, and these midrashim. So what category do we put non-halachic midrashim in? And in what sense is that called Torah Peh? That was one of our questions. Another question was if Pardes includes all of science, all of physics and metaphysics. So, like, in what sense is that called Talmud, or is included in Talmud? I mean, again, I don't think most Rishonim or postim would say that if you open up a book on physics, then you're studying Talmud. You know, it's just a much broader concept of Talmud than that.
You're learning how to write one thing from another.
Right. Oh, well, so that's an interesting thing. So that we're going to get to that today because. Yeah, exactly. So exactly. So the thing is that what Yosef is saying that you are basically like learning how to derive one thing from another. There is a category of that the Rambam talks about, which we're going to look at today, but he does not seem to hold that that's why you should learn Pardes. Pardes is for its own sake and for Avos Hashem and Yedias Hashem, Yiras Hashem. And then we had another question, which was, a minor question, which is, what do you mean by itim mizumanim? You know, like if the whole point is like so you don't forget your Torah, then do it as much as you need. Why itim mizumanim? Okay. So we left those aside. I did think about it and I didn't ask a few people. I thought about asking a few people. I wrote down the whole question and I was like, no, maybe I want to wait till we go through the sugya to formulate the question. So then we went to the Rambam in Perek. So that was in Perek Aleph of Talmud Torah, Halacha Yud Aleph. Then we went to Yesodei Torah Daled Yud Gimel, where he says that the subjects of the first four chapters are Pardes, and not everyone is ready for them, and those are the bread and meat, but you shouldn't those are the orchard. You shouldn't go to the orchard until you filled your belly with bread and meat, and the bread and the meat is knowing halacha for the Shara mitzvos. And then he says, even though knowledge of Shara mitzvos, of the halacha and Shara mitzvos is Davar Katon, as Chazal said that the arguments of Abai and Rav are Davar Katon, you should start with that, and then before you go into Davar Gadol. And Davar Katon, he says, the reason why you start with it is Shehin Miyashvin Da'atel Sha'adam Tchila, they settle the mind of man first. And furthermore, he says they are the great good that God gave to us to settle this world in order to inherit Olam Haba, and it's possible for everyone to know them, right? So we did not figure out what that is, and that's what I want to work on. That's one of the big questions, because this is the thing: why should you study the Havayos to Avai Barava on other mitzvos? What's the purpose? And so he says, so we have to figure out what is this Yishuv Hadas, and what is Yishuv Olam Hatova Hakadosh Sheishpia Kadosh Baruch Hu Yishuv Olam Zeh Kedei Linchol Chaylam Haba. And so he uses the word Yishuv twice, right? Liyashiv Hadas and Yishuv Olam Zeh. And it's also weird because what do you, if I ask you to translate Yishuv Hadas, like where do you usually encounter that term? Miyashiv Hadas or Yishuv Hadas. He talks about Yishuv Hadas there? Oh, yeah? Oh, that does sound familiar now that you mention it. Let me just do a quick search here. I'm not displaying this. Talmud Torah. Oh yeah, Datum Yeshevas Alav, I think is the thing that you're thinking of. Hold on. Which is, yeah, I think that would be dot. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten that one. Let me just display the screen. I'm going to switch it to show all the screen. Yeah. So Chaim is giving an example in Hilchos Talmud Torah itself, where it says in Perek Dalet Halacha Vav about like the procedure for when you should and shouldn't ask your Rav questions. Ein sholin as a Rav kishi kans lebeis haMidrash ad shetis yashav dato alav. You shouldn't ask the Rav a question when he first enters the Beis Midrash until his mind is settled, right? Yeah, so settling of the mind, you know. And I feel like there are other places where he uses it in a similar way. Is any more in Talmud Torah? No. I'm thinking, what was I thinking of? I think I was thinking, is there a case in Shabbos? Hold on. I really should have done a full search in the Mishnah Torah before this, but I'm not going to do that now. Mesiach Das, no. I thought it was in, oh, Shnis Kara Dato, that's what I was thinking. Oh, I know why I wanted to bring this. Yeah. So Das in the Rambam, I'll just say this now, and you can either take my word for it, you could search for yourself. Das in the Rambam usually means like psyche. Like when we say like your peace of mind, we don't mean mind. When we say peace of mind, we don't mean peace of intellect. We mean peace of like mind, like your mind is settled, you know? Like he says here, oh, he does say Miyashav Data. Hold on. Yeah, this is the one I was thinking of. So hakorea k'dei lid for shtei tefira, someone who tears in order to sew 2 stitches. This is in Hilchos Shabbos Yud Yud. Almanas lid for shtei tefiros chayev. So if he does it with the intent to sew 2 stitches, then he's chayev. But if he's tearing just to destroy, pater makalkel. If he does it just to destroy, then he's pater because that's makalkel. That's just destruction. That's not a creative activity. Then he says hakoreh b'chamaso. But if you tear something in anger, o almanas shu chayev likro alav, or sorry, almes shayu chayev likro alav, or if you tear for a dead person, a dead person that you're chayev to tear on, chayev. Okay, why? On the surface that sounds destructive. Because you're settling your mind with this via nuach yitzro, and you're putting your yetzer to rest. And since your anger is abetted with this thing, with this act, then it's like you're doing a constructive act and you're chayev. Fine. So there, you clearly does not mean that you're like doing anything to your intellect. You know, you're doing something to your psyche. So the question is like, in that sense, what does the Rambam mean when he says it's miyashiv dato shel adam tchila, that the learning habayos dabai v'rava settles your psyche? It is possible to mean something else. Yeah. Yeah. And I do think he means something else.
Yeah. I would have said that it means something wrong. It settles a person's mind and
Yeah. Okay. So meaning it so can you give me like an example of what that looks like? That it settles your mind in order to prepare you for massive ratios?
I don't know. I mean, it helps you figure out the proper direction.
Okay, proper directive thinking. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, no, that's good. Okay, and then we could talk about examples in a little while. So hold on to that thought, and then in fact, we're gonna go slightly out of order here. Okay, what I want to do is because I think you're right, I want to go into the Rambam's harshest statement about learning Gemara, and then go into a place in the Moreh Nevuchim where I think he says what you're saying, and then revisit this. Okay, so in Rambam's letter, so there's a fragment of his letter to R Yosef, who was one of his Talmidim, when he talks about how to learn the Mishnah or about learning the Mishnah Torah. Okay, so that's in the packet on that next page. And this is, I guess, written in Arabic, but it's translated by Rav Shelat. Okay, because I guess this is like a new fragment that they didn't have at the time of Ibn Tibbons. So first of all, he says a great line, which I quoted earlier last year. I've already testified to you. Don't rest until you've grasped the entire Mishnah Torah. V'yasehu l'sifro, and make it into your book. Okay, I got to make it yours. V'yalamdehu b'chol makom lahafitz Torah, and you should teach it everywhere in order to spread its benefit. Okay, that's why I'm doing Rambam Bekius. Okay, trying to fulfill this. Lefi, I mentioned this last year, but I'll mention it again. Is the way I developed my relationship with the Mishnah Torah was when they first came out with the 1-volume one. I literally carried it everywhere with me. And whenever any question or any topic came up, I consulted it, and not for halakha l'maaseh, but for like seeing what the Rambam says on it. And I carried it everywhere for years. And so that's how I gained intimate familiarity with the Mishnah Torah. And whenever something came up, like let's say like a student would ask a question in high school, I would, in addition to like looking it up in whatever sources I would research it in, I would look it up in the Mishnah Torah, and I gained familiarity. So, and this was in direct response to this line in this letter. Okay. Lefisha tachlis hamechuvenes b'ma shechubar b'talmud b'zulasa kvar nichrasa v'avda. Okay, so that's the strong statement, because the purpose of the intended purpose of that which was compiled in the Talmud and other things has already ceased and is lost. Okay, so we have to figure out what this means. So, but the whatever the purpose of the Talmud is gone. The tachlis halamdanim, and the end of the lamdanim, the thing that the lamdanim are striving for, kilu yazman, is a waste of time. But masa umatan Talmud, in the arguments and deliberations in the Talmud. Have you seen this before? Okay, this is that's what I meant. It's a very harsh statement. Now, by the way, we should mention this was in a letter to a private student. Okay, this is not, Rambam doesn't say anything like this in the Mishnah Torah, but that's what we have to do, is we have to reconcile. There are people who have conspiracy theories about the Rambam that, like, they call it the esoteric and exoteric thing. Like, he was like advocating for one thing in his public works and another thing in his private works. I don't buy that theory. And so our job is to see, how does this fit into the Rambam's framework? Because that's not the that's not MS.
I know just the board of Lukum should be in third paragraph. So the limitator said by certain people.
Oh no, but that's different. Concealing things is he definitely does, right? But undermining halacha, like, there are people who go so far as to say, I mean, I think this is an academic theory, that like, the Rambam only wrote the Mishnah Torah for the masses, and he doesn't really hold by halacha. Like, it's just like this. That's why I'm calling them conspiracy theories, to degrade them. I think that's just absurd. But yeah, I just want to mention it so you're aware that it's out there. Oh, so anyway, so some people will say that that's the case here. That in Hilchos Talmud Torah, the Rambam says you should spend all your days learning Talmud, but in his letter to his student, he says it's a waste of time. Right, now he calls Talmud, but functionally speaking, the Rambam knows that you're going to be learning Talmud. Yeah, he does. Yeah, we are working on that. Yeah. Okay. So, but anyway, so he says that the purpose for which the Talmud was composed is lost and is gone and is a waste of time. And the purpose of lamdanim is a waste of time in the argumentations in the Talmud. As if, this is like a sarcastic statement, as if the purpose of the Talmud was expertise in argumentation. Okay. So this is what, if you've ever heard people use the term pilpul, and people use it both l'shvach and l'gnai, so pilpul was a method that that you could say that the Brisker Derek was kind of in competition with in the days of Volozhin. I'm going to pause this for 1 second. Like, I think they tell a joke about Rav Chaim that someone was bragging about a sefer that was written by another like Lamdan or another Talmud Chacham, and he says like, oh, like in this, have you seen the sefer? In this sefer, this Rav gives 80 answers for one question, and Rav Chaim goes, I would rather have one answer for 80 questions. Like there's this style where like the whole thing is you're basically like trying to do intellectual gymnastics to answer questions, and I think that's the sense I get when the Rambam says that there are people who learn Talmud just to get like expertise in argumentation, as if like that's the whole point. And again, and if you do look at a lot of post-Rishonic even some in the Rishonim, but like post-Rishonic, like Pirushim of the Gemara, it's just like, yeah, reams and reams of pages and pages and pages of like working out all the, if you do this here, this here, this here, then it all like fits into place, So that's what I assume the Rambam's talking about. Again, I don't know in his day what that was like, but loads of less and nothing else than this. Okay, so then he says like this: that was not the first intent of the Talmud. Aval hamasa umatan v'havikuach amnam naflu b'mikre. All of the argumentation and back and forth into the Talmud came about by chance, like incidentally, not by chance, but incidentally. Kasher haya mamar shakul, when you have two statements that are equal, ufirshu echad b'firish, and one person explains it in one way, ufirshu ha'acher b'chilufo, and the other one explains it in another way. Chutzrach kol echad mehem laharos ofen rayaso ulahachriya pirusho. Then each one needs to bring to present his way of seeing it and to bring his proof. So that's how the argumentations came about. Okay, but the first goal of Talmud, amnam haisa yedias mashet la soso ulhizaher mimenu, is knowledge of what it is required to do or to refrain from. V'zeh mavura l'shikamoso, and this should be clear to someone like you. I think that's what it means. Ulfikach nechlatznu anachnu elamuchuvan arishon. Therefore, we are going to relieve ourselves of the first intent, meaning talking about we relieved ourselves of the first intent, meaning lahako zechira, so to make it easier to remember, meaning the Rambam didn't include any of the Masa Matan in the Mishnah Torah. Yasser al-Kain lahodio lefi shekvar avad b'toch kol divrei hamasa Matan. Also, the primary intent has been lost among all the deliberation, and that's what he writes about in the Hakdama to the Mishnah Torah, that people get so lost in the back and forth that they don't know how to get the halacha from the sugyas in the Gemara. V'hinachnu ma shizulaso l'mishi yivchar sheyasehu imona, and we're leaving this other stuff for someone who wishes to become an expert in it. Meaning, let the guys who like going into the Maso Matan and the Gemara become an expert in it. And all the more so someone who doesn't even consider it to be expertise. But people who think that it's the main purpose, through which you can become a gadol, and that's what he wants to look at. And then that's where the fragment ends. So just to summarize here, so what he's criticizing is people who basically look at the Gemara and they become so preoccupied in the back and forth that they either think that that's the purpose of it, or they lose sight of like knowing what the halacha l'maisa is. And again, who's the person who before the Rambam wrote a work in which he clearly held that the back and forth is not the essence? The Rif, right? The Rif literally just took out all of the argumentation in the Gemara and only included the halacha l'maisa,
I'm not necessarily saying that that's not important. I'm just saying that also I need to have a halacha.
Right. He's saying that it's not the essence, right? Because if it were the essence, then you shouldn't take it out, Say again? Two equal rules of knowing what to do and then knowing the Masa Matan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
If you need to know the mathematics, then it's good. But
yeah.
if you need to know the halacha, then you not just having the whole modern one thing.
Right.
Get it.
Right. So, yeah. So let me ask you a question that I've heard formulated in two different ways. Okay. So one was asked by someone in Rav Pesach's shir one year. He said something to the effect of like, would it be a good use of my time to go through the Gemara and just to find all the Havaminas? Okay, that was one question. And then another question, which I'm making up, which is similar, is if someone wrote a sefer entitled Shulchan Aruch Shel Beis Shammai, where they attempted to like go through all the analysis of like Beis Shammai. So the question is, what would you say is the worth of that, if anything? But what would you say is the worth of either of those endeavors?
Well, I'm in the same. Whatever you say, the worth of mathematics.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at. That's what I'm wondering. Yeah. So what would the worth of that be? Because I do think that, for example, let's say in our yeshiva, we clearly learn the Masa Matan, but I think we have a certain agenda in learning the Masa Matan.
Well, you're saying that you have to learn mathematics to figure out that.
Well, that's what the Rambam is saying, right? Is figure out the actual Masa. But I think that like most Ashkenazi, in our yeshiva, then in Rebbe Shir, he definitely used to do this, is going through a sugya and taking it all the way through into the halacha lemaisa. And I think when I've been in Rav Pesach Shir and he does sugyas in stuff that is halacha lemaisa, practically like when we did Ketzah Mevarchin or whatever, then he does that as well. So we clearly do care about that, but I do think that we can put into words what we're looking for in the Masa Matan. Like in other words, how does the Masa Matan help us to get to the halacha lemaisa?
I think that's all.
But how though? Yeah, what are you gonna say?
Clarify the position of the actual halacha.
Yes, right. In other words, I think the way, just methodologically, the way we approach it is, if you have a machlokus, it helps you to understand both conceptual shitos better, conceptually, and then when you get down to the practical halacha, you can trace that svara down to the practical halacha. But what we don't do, for example, is, unless it's just, for the sake of thoroughness, I do not, in my experience in our yeshiva at least, we don't spend an excessive amount of time going over the portions of the Gemara that are just limudim, that are machlokas, like just rayas and such, In other words, I think what we look for when we look at a Talmudic shakal of Ataria is this going to help us to understand the sugya from a conceptual standpoint? And then when we have the halacha lemaisa, then is that conceptual understanding going to go down to the level of halacha, of that halacha? I'll give you an example of this, and I only remember this example because it was the first sugya that we did in yeshiva, that I did in yeshiva, that was halacha lemaisa in the beginning of shlosha she'achlu. Hold on, I'll give you an example of this. I think this is good for us to go through. Anyone have any idea what daf it is? Yeah.
I think of something.
Yeah, let me look at can we do the, okay, that's way too far. Okay, hold on a second. I'll just type in shlosha she'achlu ke'echad. Is that not the line? Oh, it says why is it not referencing me to the Gemara? It's just okay. Wait, let's just go here. Okay, Menhe. Okay, we found it. I think. Yeah, there we go. Okay, Shlosha she'achlu. This is in. I gotta share the screen. Shlosha she'achlu ke'echad chayavin lazamin. Is that the line? Chayavin lazamin. Right. So the Gemara starts off by saying, "Minaha nemili." I'm gonna get rid of the kudos because it throws me off. So where do we know this from? Amar, so there's machlokas Amarayim. Okay. Amar Rav Asi, Amar Kra. So Rav Asi says in the name of the Kra, Gadlu let Hashem iti onaroma mashmo yachtav. So glorify Hashem with me, and we will exalt his name together. Rabbi Abahu Amar Mehacha. Rabbi Abahu says, Ki Shem Hashem ekra havu godel elokenu. When I call out in the name of Hashem, give greatness to our God, or ascribe greatness to our God. And I think there's a Rashi there that says, Gadlu let Hashem iti, Hare Shlosha, that's 3. V'chein ekra havu godel, hayachid omer l'shnayim. So I remember in Rabbi Man's here, then we were defining this. I don't remember this far because we're talking, this is in 2002. But the question was, what is zimun? Is zimun a group shevach with 3 people? That's havu let Hashem. Gadlu let Hashem iti. That and the leader is only calling out so that the other 2 join him. So but really it's like a triplicate shevach, or a group shevach that has 3 as a minimum, or is it a call and response shevach if you have a yachid saying to 2, So I remember thinking about this, and this somehow became a paradigm of when you go through a sugya and you see this, no one that I know brings down a halachic nafkamina of this. There's no halachic nafkamina I'm aware of, right? So the question is does this shed light on the halachic underpinnings of what we're doing, in which case we would be interested in it? Or is this some sort of archaic, battle of the drashos that is in the same category as when we see some sort of machlokas in midos she'atar and drashos, then we kind of just glaze over it and don't take it. And I feel in at least in our methodology here, in the Rebbeim that I've had shear from, there are different shitos or different intuitions as to how much to like apply the brisker derech to this type of shakla vataria or this type of like drashos, and how much not, But I think the interest is all the same. Is we would view this as valuable if it led us to a svara that illuminated the conceptual underpinnings of what we're doing, or if it led to a halachic nafkamina. So the question, going back now to the Rambam, I know. Yes, right, exactly, right. So I'd say, for example, the value of understanding the Havamina in the Gemara is to understand the Maskana. Not that there's a value of understanding Havaminas per se. Yeah.
Wouldn't that still help with similar
Theoretically, it could. Yeah, right. Theoretically, if you're treating it like a machlokus, then it could. But that's why I was asking, what's the question? In other words, it's not just that we are interested in.
We're saying the machlokus is not.
Yeah, and I think that's what the Rambam means when he says it's a waste of time and it only came about incidentally. I'm fully aware I could be projecting our derech into the Rambam, but I feel like the Rambam would not say that he was able to arrive at psak without the shakla vataria. Like he would say he had to go through the right. He would have to go through the shakla vataria in order to understand the sugya and then paskin from the sugya.
Right.
And he would acknowledge that there are parts of the shakla vataria that are relevant and valuable for understanding the sugya, and parts that yeah.
We're saying that really had
Yeah. Yeah.
Then what's the Rambam said, "Oh, I know
right."
And really, he said,
well, he's saying in order to know the sugya, to know the halacha l'maisa, then you have to know then all you need is the Mishnah Torah, right? But he's saying in order to understand achris davar mereshiso and heach yoti ha'asar v'muter, then I would assume you would need the Talmud. So that we said one answer yesterday, which is that for the Rambam does in the Sefer Mitzvos under Avas Hashem say that you get Avas Hashem through appreciating Chachma in Torah and in nature, even though in the Mishnah Torah he really emphasizes nature. So you could definitely get an Avas Hashem from there, And I do think that that for someone who is in a position to paskin on their own, the Rambam would not say that you should just rely on the Mishnah Torah. Like the Rambam, when he says in the Hagdama, like what he did of sorting through all the Gonim and all the Gemara and the Yam Shel Talmud, I think he would advocate that for someone who is able to do that, should do that on their own, and for that person also, it's not a waste of time, And then we're going to see another purpose in a little while. Yeah. Okay, but the thing that I just can't fully account for here is it still is very harsh. And like there is a sort of a dismissiveness that this only came about by indirectly, and I feel like there's something more there that the Rambam is saying that I'm not quite getting at. Like for example, and this might be a difference between different schools of thought in the Rambam, but like let's say we found out. Okay, let's say Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, right, have a machlokas on tefillin. Let's say we found out for 100%, okay, like Moshe Rabbeinu came down. Okay, we wouldn't necessarily believe Yeshua had been known, but let's say Moshe Rabbeinu came down and said, Rashi's right. I do think the Rambam would say that studying Rabbeinu Tam Shita is a waste of time. And I don't think everyone else would say that. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, yeah. And Oren actually asked me another question yesterday about that as well, that touched on that topic as well. Yeah. What was that?
I guess so if they're calling the question, even if Moshe came down and said it, do you care?
Right. Yeah. Well, so it's funny. That's why I made the Yeshua joke, because the Chazal statement is, I wouldn't believe it even if Yeshua ben Nun said it. Moshe Rabbeinu is a different question. I think, the question is, could Moshe Rabbeinu, well, he couldn't say anything new, but yeah, I think, yeah, that's a good question. That's a good a hypothetical question, is if Moshe Rabbeinu told us how to interpret Torah, what status would that have,
Right.
Yeah. Would he just be like a chacham like everyone else, or would it be at the same level as Torah Sinai? Especially because you have halacha l'moshe Sinai as a phenomenon, and just because the set text of Torah is there, whatever. That's a good question. But in terms of how halacha and machlokas evolved, that might be something we can get into later on if we need to, because that was really like the shiur Isaac gave last year, right? Of the evolution of Torah Bal Peh. Right. If it comes up in the course of Talmud Torah, I'd be fine going into it. Yeah.
I don't know. I think that it bothers me that the thing that happened in the whole mother.
Right.
Like, that is
No, well, okay. I mean, well, it's instant. Right. I mean, this gets into the question of what's the Rambam Shita on machlokas, because the Rambam has that very, very hard to understand Shita, that if there is a machlokas on anything, then ipso facto, that was not something that was said at Sinai. Yeah, I know. Right. No, because the way I would say it, not with taking that into account, is I would say, what does it mean it came about incidentally? Well, let's take the way normal people think about it. How does machlokas come about? Is they forgot something, or they became unclear on something. So it only came about as a result of ignorance. So, but if we maintain the Masorah accurately, there would be no machlokas. Or I mean, except for in the cases that we mentioned, like yesterday or 2 days ago, with the like new halakha cases and stuff, there's still be machlokas there. Yeah. Yeah, it does. Kilu Yasman, right? Waste of time. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's why. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah.
Or change your position. I was thinking about that.
Right. Yeah.
You can't tell me that the math of what
right. Right. Well, so that's why in my efforts to be melamed zechus on the Rambam / in my efforts to be melamed zechus from the Rambam onto us, I don't know which one I'm doing. Then I restricted that statement of the Rambam to a certain type of maso matan, which I do think is a waste of time, but you're right. He doesn't sound like he's saying that. I'm stretching here, like I'll give you another example, right? Is there's the whole series of I think the Rambam talks about this somewhere in the Hakam the Parish of Shnayos, that the Gemara goes through a whole bunch of things of what is Priyat Hadar, and it gives different candidates. Like, is it esrog? Is it capers? Is it pepper? And it brings rayos. And the Rambam, I believe the Rambam says, they knew what the Priyat Hadar was. They knew it was an esrog. So what's with all of this drushes is that's just chachmas hakatuv, like, so I feel like that would also be included in what the Rambam says by Masa Matan, but yeah.
Other than that, you would know that
right. Right. And again, yeah, right. Yeah.
Shofar,
right. Yeah, I was gonna say shofar is the biggest example. Yeah. So let's leave this as a tzarech iyun, but this is one thing that, again, I think it is it's good to read, to know about in order to try to reconcile it. And again, this is something that I'm inferring. I didn't read it. Again, Rav Shelat has the history of every fragment that he writes on here. The fact that they call it a fragment and the fact that he translated it, I assume means that it was not available to the Ibn T-Bone family and it was found in the Cairo Geniza or something like that.
There's no
yeah, I think this is the only copy or the only part that we have. But apparently this is something that is, what was that? Yeah. And again, it was a personal letter, so there's context involved. I do want to read one thing that Rav Shelat says, not the whole footnote here, but on the first page, Shura 4, Lefi Shetachu Zamuchavenes, So he says, "In Yano Shal Katash Lefanenu, the subject matter of the fragment in front of us, Hakavia Ha'ikronis Shatachlis Ha'ikronis Shalimut Hachelak Ha'halachti Shal Torah, is establishing the main reason, the fundamental reason why we learn the halachic portion of Torah. He Asuki Shmaitza Ali B'Dehilchasa is concluding the practical halacha from the Torah Bal Peh. Yedias Mashet Tzarech La'asosa Olihizar Mimenu, which the Rambam here says, knowing what to do and what not to do. Kokusuv, as it says in Devarim 5:1, you shall learn them in and keep them to do them. Ein Hilchos HaTorah Aleph Gimel, V'hamasa matan v'hapilpul ha'talmudim enam ela emtzaim l'tachlis zos. So he even says what I said, that the back and forth and the Talmudic analysis is only a means of arriving at this. Mikan yesh makom lamaskanos b'asher l'drachim ritzuyos b'limud Talmud. From here you can see conclusive places for conclusions about the proper path of learning Talmud, v'chashivus limud kavua b'sifrei psak halacha, and the importance of learning learning psak halacha. Rav, okay, then he goes and he cites a bunch of sources. Oh, we're going to go through one of them in a second, and then he quotes. Oh, sorry, yeah. Look. First one line is made. Oh, fine. So he says, Rav Pinchas Adayan accused him of like wanting to get rid of the study of Gemara. I think it was Rav Pinchas, and he says, he says Chas v'shalom, that I'm telling people to do that. Sharia Talmud hu ikar shel halacha. Talmud is the foundation of halacha. Mimenu lemedim haposkim lifsok. That's how the poskim learn how to poskim. Umimenu kone kol adam as darche hachashivas halachtis. That's how a person obtains the proper halachic knowledge. By the way, that's another answer. By the way, yeah. So here's another answer. By the way, it could be that the Rambam was writing to this student saying, for you, Talmud is a waste of time because you need to learn the practical psak halacha. But for a halachist, the only way a halachist gets psak is by learning the Talmud. You know. That's why I was emphasizing before. The Rambam clearly doesn't hold that for him, Talmud was a waste of time.
Yeah, I'm sure you need more access.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, then he says, okay, now skip all this part because this is a long quote from the Hagdam to the Pirish Mishnayos. And are we reading any more? No, that's it. Okay, fine. Okay, so now new source. Okay, this is the Moreh Nevuchim. Okay, so I want to say I'm very happy to have found this. I'll tell you where I found it. First of all, when I was taught that halacha and Yesodei Torah Daled Yud Gimel about Yishuv Hadas, when I was taught by Rabbi Yoni Sachs, he said that the Rambam means that one of the purposes of studying the Havayos Devai B'Varava is to train your mind. Okay, and that's what you said, Chaim. And then that's what Rabbi Moskowitz always taught me also. So then I got this book. Oh man, I forgot what the book is called. Hold on. I got to look it up. I always do that. Muli Phillips. I'll just say Rabbi in case there's a non-rabbinic Shmuley Phillips. This book that he wrote called, Judaism Reclaimed. Philosophy and Theology in the Torah, which is very Rambam centric. So I bought this book last year and I read very recently a essay he has on the Rambam's attitude towards Talmud. Interestingly enough, he did not bring that letter. Okay, I don't know. It's possible that he didn't know about it. I mean, he knows about a lot of stuff, but he also holds that the Rambam in Yesodei Torah 4:13 is saying what we're saying, and then he directs us to this as a proof. Okay, so this is in the Moreh Nevuchim 134, where the Rambam is saying how you shouldn't jump into metaphysics. Okay, and how you need a lot of preparation. Okay, so if you skip down to the line in the lower third of the, very close to the end, that's first one line is imaginings, 5 lines up from the bottom, 6 lines up. He says, there are also many speculative subjects that, although no premises can be obtained from them for the use of the science, nevertheless train the mind and procure it the habitus of drawing inferences and knowledge of the truth in matters pertaining to its essence. They also put an end to the confusion in most of the minds of those engaged in speculation, a confusion mistaking things that are accidental for those that are essential. Hereby, an end is also put to the perversion of opinions arising out of this confusion. All this is achieved in addition to the representation of these subjects as they really are, even if they in no way belong to the divine science. These subjects are also not devoid of utility in other points, namely with respect to matters that lead up to that science. Accordingly, it is certainly necessary for whoever wishes to achieve human perfection to train himself at first in the art of logic, then in the mathematical sciences according to the proper order, then in the natural sciences, and after that, the divine science, meaning metaphysics. We find many people whose mind stops short at one of these sciences, and sometimes, even if their mind does not miss the mark, they are cut off by death while engaged in some preliminary study. Accordingly, if we have never in any way acquired an opinion through following traditional authority, and were not correctly conducted towards something by means of parables, but were obliged to achieve a perfect representation by means of essential definitions, and by pronouncing true only that which is meant to be pronounced true in virtue of a demonstration, which would be impossible except after the above mentioned lengthy preliminary studies, this state of affairs would lead to all people dying without having known whether there's a deity for the world or whether there's not, much less whether a proposition should be affirmed with regard to him or defect. Okay, you know what? I think that's it. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Nobody would ever be saved from this perdition except one of a city or two of a family. As for the few solitary individuals that are the remnant whom the Lord calls, the perfection which constitutes the end to be aimed at is realized for them only after the above mentioned preliminary studies. Solomon has made it clear that the need for preliminary studies is a necessity and that it is impossible to attain true wisdom except after having been trained. For he says, if the iron be blunt and he who do not whet the edge, then must he be put to more strength, but even more preparation is needed for wisdom. And he also says, hear counsel and receive instruction, that thou mayest be wise in the latter end. Okay, is this part necessary? Just 1 second, let me skim. Yeah. Okay, let me read this next part and then I'll summarize in plain English here. There's also a necessity of another kind for achieving knowledge of the preliminary studies. It arises from the fact that when a man seeks to obtain knowledge quickly, many doubts occur to him, and he moreover quickly understands objections. I mean to say the destruction of a particular doctrine, this being similar to the demolition of a building. Now, the establishment of doctrines as true and the solution of doubts can only be grounded upon many premises taken from these preliminary studies. One engaged in speculation without preliminary study is therefore comparable to someone who walked on his 2 feet in order to reach a certain place. Oh, hold on, maybe this is different. This is different. Okay, let me summarize what he said before. Okay, Rambam is saying like this. You can't just jump into metaphysics for several reasons. The reason he's writing about here is that if you jump into metaphysics before you've trained your mind in logical thinking and differentiating between accidents and essences and following the laws of logic, so then you're going to make mistakes in metaphysics where those mistakes will be disastrous. So you first have to train your mind in logic, math, astronomy, which they held was not a branch of science. They held it was a branch of mathematics. He doesn't list this here, but I think other Mepharshim would say harmony, which they also viewed as a branch of mathematics. Why? Not because that knowledge will give you actual insight into metaphysics, but because you're training your mind to not make mistakes when you go into metaphysics. Okay, so too, he doesn't say it here, but Rabbi Shmuley Phillips says, and Rabbi Moskowitz says that Gemara is the best way to train your mind in this stuff, because Gemara trains you in thinking clearly and logically and conceptually, and will prepare you for Davar Katon. So I think that's what it means when it says it's miyashiv the das, and like what you said, that he doesn't, okay, actually it's slightly what you said. We noted that yeshiv das means settling the psyche, but it could also be settling the mind. And I think it's both here, meaning why do people make mistakes in metaphysics? Either their emotions take over or their mind is untrained. And learning how to analyze something logically and clearly and remove your emotions from it and follow the rules of logic and induction and all that other stuff, that will train you in being able to approach metaphysics objectively and accurately. Okay, so that's what I think the Rambam means by yeshiv das. And in fact, now I'm remembering this. Let me get it on my phone. Wait, did I save it on my computer? Rabbi Eli Fader.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yes. Yeah. So Rabbi Fader made a list of, I don't know if it was him and Rabbi Zimmer or a bunch of other people, how Gemara teaches thinking. I'm just going to read it. I can't put it up on the screen because it involves too many steps. So he says, how Gemara teaches thinking. Learning Gemara involves many important intellectual activities, including, and there's some overlap in these, A, deductive thinking, B, inductive thinking, C, definition, D, categorization, E, drawing careful distinctions, F, isolating core issues by separating essences from accidents. G, differentiating between questions and refutations. H, holding complex sets of facts in your mind. I, asking probing questions. J, using step-by-step thinking to arrive at answers. K, methodological thinking. L, applying rules in formal systems. M, careful textual analysis. N, unification. O, theory testing. P, thorough investigation of all relevant information. Q, looking for clues to help solve problems. Okay, so that was a list of how Gemara trains your mind, and there was other stuff for Gemara as well, but that was for the Yishuv Hadas that we're talking about here. You know, so I think that stands to reason and fits into the words of the Rambam that why can't you just stroll in the orchard? Why do you need the bread and the meat? Because the bread and the meat is knowing how to think, and then you can apply it, you know, correctly. Yeah. Okay. I copied more than Nevuchim just in case. I actually want to go through one more source, which is not in the packet. This is in the Rambam's palace allegory. Yeah. It's at the end of Chelek Gimel. Yeah. It's in Gimel Nun Aleph. So Yosef, you had said earlier that maybe the Rambam holds that the reason, I forgot how you said it, but like that what we're saying now is study of Gemara prepares you for studying Pardes. And I think you said something that implied that maybe it means the opposite, that studying like the sciences and stuff can help with Gemara, or did you not mean that? Okay, fine. So then you didn't mean that, but I'm going to show you how Rambam doesn't mean that anyway. So we're not going to read through, sorry, we're not going to read the whole thing. This is from a shir I gave. Oh yeah. Okay, so we're not going to read through the whole thing, but the Rambam gives this elaborate analogy about a palace. Oh, am I sharing the screen? Yeah, I am. He says, basically you have the king in his palace, and there are different people in different levels of closeness to the palace. Then there are some people who reach the chamber of the king and go, or the palace of the king, and go around it in search of the entry gate, but they haven't gotten into the king's palace yet. And then there are people who get into the king's palace. Okay, so in the Rambam's Nimshal, he says, first of all, the people who are faced towards the king's chamber and don't enter it or haven't seen it are the masses who keep mitzvos. The people who arrive at the chamber and go around it, he says, are the scholars who have conviction in true beliefs by way of tradition and are involved in studying the laws of the acts of divine service, but have not gone into depth in the analysis of the foundations of the religion and not established the truth of their conviction through investigation. So these are the people who are only involved in the study of halacha, but have not, and they accept Yesodei HaTorah through tradition, but have not actually ventured into it firsthand. And then the people who have entered into the antechamber are those who are actually studying the Yesodei HaTorah. You know, so that's another place where the Rambam says that if all you do is involve yourself in the study of halacha, which is really a means to an end, and you don't involve yourself in the end, then you haven't gotten into the palace yet. Yeah. Okay. Last source in the packet. Why did I include this last source? And what was I getting at? Oh yeah, for this one cheeky line. Okay. So this is, I think in the letter, this is in Igeres Tchias Mesim, so second page from the end. So he says, he's talking about the Mishnah Torah again. And he says, why? Oh yeah. So this is the very last line. Kvar yadatem she'anu le'olam notim lechaser hamachlokas. He says, you know that we always strive to diminish machlokas, vavikuchim, and arguments. And then here's the line: V'lu haya efshar lanu lasum kol haTalmud beperek echad lo haynu mesimim oso b'shnei parakim. If we were able to summarize the whole Talmud in one chapter, we would not do it in two. Okay. And that's another statement that I just don't know how it fits into the puzzle of, it seems like this fits in with what Rambam said earlier about how like the Masa and Mata in the Talmud is not the essence. And he's saying if we could get rid of all the Masa and Mata, then we would, you know, but I just don't know what he means by it and if there's any implications for our subject. Yeah. So the one thing we didn't figure out, which we can go to back, let's go back to Yesodei Torah, Daled Yud Gimel again. So we figured out how the Davar Katon is the Miyashiv Dato Shel Adam. So it basically prepares the mind of man to be able to enter into Pardes through training his thinking and reforming his psyche. But then what's the relevance of Sheina Tova Hagdola Shishpia Kadosh Baruch Hu Lishav Olam Zeh K'dei Linchol Chai Olam Haba? What is he getting at there? And remember, this is referring to Leda Beir Ha'asr V'Hamuter V'Kiyot of Hemishar Mitzvos. I think there's a simple answer.
I don't really think I don't know, but
Yeah.
in terms of that, and you know, all the more imaginary from the world from like the best way.
Yeah.
Not like in the pop mode, not like
Practical. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think that's what he means also. So I think what he's saying here is like this, is the one benefit of studying the Bir Ha'asra Mutter is to train your own mind. But then also, in order to keep halacha correctly, you need to understand the Bir Ha'asra Mutter. And when you keep halacha correctly and everyone's doing that, then you're going to create a functioning society which will allow more people to get to the level where they're ready for Pardes. That's why he's emphasizing the Yishuv Ha'olam and the good of the world. You know? So I think that's that. Yeah?
You know, if I don't correctly, I don't think I can find that no one get into all that one, like the brain and what over all that one is a person's brain on now in the fact
Right.
I like I mean, you know, like had like it would seem based on that like all these like nothing like really personally in the detail out actually all the regimen and in the same spot.
Right. So let me just repeat the question to make sure I understand it. Is if the Rambam holds that the only way you get Olam Haba is your soul being attached to Chachma, so then what does that say about the practice of halacha? Meaning, according to the Rambam, how does the act...
Right, according to Rambam, knowledge in the past model.
Right.
All the people wanting that.
Yeah.
Wanting to involved in halacha in the mitzvah.
Okay, right.
And I don't know, like outline, I think the mitzvah when the put aside.
Right. So that part I can answer, which is that the king's palace is not a mashal for Olam Haba, right? And the Rambam does hold Kol Yisrael Yesh Lahem Chelek Olam Haba, and that's why he wrote the Ikarim, because even if you attach to ideas by way of authority, you know, to the Ikarim by way of authority, apparently in the Rambam's metaphysics, that's enough knowledge, real knowledge, to give your soul eternal existence, you know? So that's how he gets the masses into Olam Haba. I thought you were asking a different question, which is that if the Rambam holds that knowledge is the only thing that gets you Olam Haba, then how does action also, where does action fit in?
What? I'm not exactly asking that question.
Yeah.
I'm like, but I feel like there's no like all like tools that are like assisted, but not like necessary. The only answer that comes to mind is answering that question. Like, you realize when the radar and the clock. I don't see like that as like a necessary thing.
Right. I mean, I don't know if this is the same thing as what you're saying, but I always thought of it as like, okay, let's say you had a chemist who says like, let's say you have a mentally healthy chemist, okay, who says, if you mix these two chemicals together and drink them, then you'll die. And then he mixes them together and he drinks them, right? So assuming he's not suicidal, like the knowledge is clearly not real to him, you know, if he's not carrying it out in action. So that's kind of how I always understood the Rambam's relationship between doing the mitzvahs and then learning them, which is that if you were to learn the Chachma on a purely intellectual level, but then you acted contrary to it, then it really shows that you don't have real knowledge of it. You have like verbal knowledge of it, but you don't. It's not really real to you. Otherwise, you would adhere to it.
Right.
Yeah. And the Rambam does say in Hilchos Tshuva 9. Is it 9 something or 8 something? I know 8 is in the paragraph about Olam Haba, but I think he says this in 9. Let's just check. Oh no, it's not there. It's not there either. Hold on. Let me just do it this way. There we go. Nope. Maybe it's not Hilchos Tshuva. I thought he says Lefi Rov Chachmos of Rov Masa Hu Zocha. That according to the magnitude. Oh, I can't do that. That's gonna be too much. Wait, Rov Masa. Yeah, I thought there was a phrase where in Hilchos Tshuva where he says that you're Zochot Olam Haba based on the magnitude of your Chachma and your Masa. I have to find out where he says that. Yeah. Okay, I think this is a good stopping point for today, and then we'll continue on the Holocaust tomorrow with women learning. Oh, sorry, but you're not gonna be here, right? Okay, yeah. So we'll talk about tomorrow later on. Yeah. Okay, let's end for now. I'll stop the recording. Yeah.